What's up, guys? Who's ready for some worship?
This is Unstoppable God.
Tune our hearts into your beat. Where we walk, and there you'll be. With fire in our eyes, with hives are your light, with love untamed. It's blazing out, the streets will glow forever bright. The glory's breaking through the night. You will never fade away. Your love is here to stay by my side in my life, shining through me every day. You will never fade away. Your love is here to stay by my side in my life, shining through me every day. fire in our eyes, our lives a light and love untamed. It's blazing out, the streets will glow forever bright. The glory's breaking through the night. You will never fade away. Your love is here to stay by my side in my life, shining through me every day. You will never fade away. Your love is here to stay by my side in my life, shining through me every day. You wake within me, wake within me. You're in my heart forever. Wake within me, wake within me. You're in my heart forever. Forever, forever, forever in your love. Forever, forever, forever in your love. Forever, forever, forever in your love. Forever, forever, forever. We know that never fade away. Your love is here to stay by my side in my life, shining through me every day. You will never fade away. Your love is here to stay by my side in my life, shining through me every day. Wake within me, wake within me. You're in my heart forever. Wake within me, wake within me. You're in my heart forever.
Well, kids, here we are, week 10 of Video Sunday School. Now, last week we talked about the end of Christ's ministry on earth. Do you remember the last thing he did? Right, he ascended to heaven to prepare for the day that he will return. He's there now working toward that day. Now, do you remember the last thing he promised before he left? Right, he promised there would be a helper. And why do we need that helper? Because we have a task of telling everyone about Jesus. Now let's look at the helper. Previously in the Old Testament, the helper only came to specific people at specific times. The judges of Israel, the kings of Israel, and the prophets of Israel did at times have the helper. When reading the Old Testament, we know they have the helper because it will say something like, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, or the word of the Lord came to him. When this happens, that person is then able, through the power of the Holy Spirit, to do great things for the Lord. Now, the helper will probably not give us the insight needed to win a battle like Gideon. He probably won't be granted the strength to knock down a temple like Samson. But we might be led to do something to the Lord so we are where he wants us to be. The Spirit will guide us in making choices between the right and wrong if we listen to him before we act. He will provide us with strength and comfort in difficult times. Now, Jesus' death and resurrection made a big change for all of us in that the Holy Spirit wouldn't just come to leaders and prophets, but to all of us. Also, the Spirit didn't come at times the Lord chose, but is with us every day. Still, in our story, the disciples are waiting for the helper to come. Now, when we left the disciples, they were traveling back from Jesus ascending on the Mount of Olives. And they went back to Jerusalem and went back to the place where they were staying. And for the next 10 days, they were praying and studying and trying to decide what was going to happen. And then finally, on the day of the Feast of Pentecost, the room was filled with a rushing wind. And the Spirit came, sitting on each of them like a flame. Then they began to speak in foreign languages. They were so excited they went out in the streets, and the streets were full of visitors from all over. They were in town for the feast. And as the disciples shouted out the good news about Jesus, everyone in the street heard that good news in their native tongue. So today, the Spirit might not make our words turn into those of another language to help us tell others about Jesus, but He will still help us spread the good news that He has given us the job to spread. We will see you next week as we learn more about spreading the good news.